Okay, let me tell you about nettles. Nettles are the most wonderful and brilliant substance that you have in your garden, the most brilliant plant that you can possibly have. They might seem prickly, unpleasant, unfriendly, but they can be your greatest friend. Okay? And I'll tell you why. They are really medicinal. You can make a tea out of them, which is like a tonic. And years ago, people used to be desperate to find them in the hedges because they were a spring tonic when everything else had died. And people would, they were one of the first things that would grow up, and then people would eat them, or they'd make a tea out of them. And what I'm doing with them is I am making cloth out of them. And my friend here is taking a short film of how we're going to do it. So is there anything else you'd like to know about?
What are other uses for nettles?
Other uses? Did I say any other uses? Oh yes, if you can make wine out of nettles. Some people are so inclined, and it makes a very good wine. Yeah, you can put it in cooking. It cooks up like spinach. You can make a very nice nettle soup, very nourishing nettle soup. I don't think you'd like to use it as a salad ingredient. That could be a bit stingy. But once you've processed them, the sting goes, and it's just a marvellous thing. Come closer, a bit closer, don't trip over anything. Here, among the thistles, we find the nettle. Grasping the nettle, okay? This is me grasping the nettle. I'm not going to put my hands over it like that because they do sting horribly, okay? You take your nettles and you soak them. And I have lovely old buckets here. And in here, I have soaked my nettles, okay? So come closer, and let's have a look, okay? Now, these are nettles. Now, it stinks. It really stinks, okay? But what I've done is I've soaked the nettles, and 12 hours later, I throw off the first water. Now, if you're so inclined, you could make wine from that water first. You could keep the water, put the nettles in a food-grade bucket, and then you could make wine from the water, but I didn't do that. What I did was I just tipped it and threw it away, and I let the nettles sit. Now these nettles have been sitting here for about 4 days, and it does smell, but not as bad as it would if you hadn't drained the water away. So what I'm looking for I'm putting my hand into this lovely stenchy mess. I have some nice carbolic soap to wash my hands with afterwards, okay? And what I'm doing, if you look very closely, hopefully it's not going to let me down. You can see the fibres there. Do you see the little fibres? I put them into this bucket here. What I'm doing is I'm peeling off the cellulose there. Peeling it off. And my idea is to get the fibres. You can see the nice white fibre. I don't know if it's able to see it on the film there. And what will happen is eventually the cellulose will rot off, leaving behind these white fibres. Can you see those?
Yes, that's lovely.
Okay. And so what I do then is I put it into the second rotting bucket, which doesn't smell so bad. And hopefully what I'm going to do is sit down here, and I'm going to peel off the bark off the nettles. And I'll be at this a while, so we can move on to process number 2. As I put them in here, and they'll rot further, and then I can get them. Okay, now when you have your nettle fibres and you've dried your nettle fibres, you're going to need these. This is a pair of carder, and here are the nettle fibres. This is I'd say this would be about 5 nettles on here, okay? And if you look very closely, you can see all the fluffy little bits. I've carded them a bit. They still have a little bit of cellulose on them, unfortunately, because they could have done with a bit more rotting, but that will all fall out as I card them. So I'm going to card them now. Basically, I'm combing the hair of the nettles here. And as I'm combing, as you can see, there's lots and lots of dust. We'll have to give a good vacuum of the carpet after all this, and I'll have to be vacuumed down as well. And we card it away here, and we get these lovely long fibres. Do you see the fibres that are coming out? These lovely fibres to spin. There are your nettle fibres. And I have, fortunately, the more I do this, the more comes off. And then one day, I hope to have a nice, fluffy mess of fibres. Okay, now this is wool fibre, and this is nettle fibre. Now, I have prepared this earlier. This isn't from the carding that you saw earlier on. This is an earlier example of nettle. And as you can see, there's not really much difference between the two, except that the fibres are slightly shorter on the nettle. They come apart easier than they do on the wool. If you look, the wool has a little bit more stretch to it, and that makes the wool a lot easier to spin. The nettle, because of the short strands, when I'm spinning it, I'm going to have to be very careful to make sure that they meet up. But one thing which I have discovered is that even by rolling it through my fingers, if you look there, I'm rolling it through my fingers, and I can actually get quite a nice yarn coming up just by doing that. But obviously I want it to be thinner and more usable. But it will. Looking at that, it looks like the great nettle experiment is well on the way to producing cloth.